Hi, this is K.N.Fitzwater, and you're watching my channel. Today we are talking about Save the Cat. Um, there are some really good things about Saving the Cat that I like. I would touch on a little bit of the bad parts that I don't care for. Um, this is very popular among most young writers and authors. Um, Anyone who is new to story theory, who have never been taught about story theory in all of their writing education, etc., this is like one of the great ones to get into. Other than Joseph Campbell, other than helping writers become authors, um, this is one of those that are really good in taking all the story theories and kind of trying to condense it into a structure that you could use in your book. Not only talks about the plot of what you need to do in your structure, in your story, but also about the character, how they're supposed to change throughout the story, where those points are in their story, and they also talk about theme. Because the external conflicts interact with the internal conflicts of the character, and that creates a theme of the story. To unlock the obstacle that's in the way for the character, they have to unlock the obstacle inside themselves. And that transformation and that change is what is the true message of the story that we're trying to tell. Whether it is Breaking Bad's How Bad Can You Go? And whether it's about Captain America's Winter Soldier, about learning how to trust and the issues of trust. How do you deal with that and security? All of those themes. So there's usually more layers than just these nice little tiny snippets of word taglines. So Save the Cat is a 3-act story structure that's been modernized for our filmmaking use. The negative part for a novelist, I should say, is that it is formatted for script. There are suggestions on where these pages are, where the points are on these pages is more script orientated. The format is for 110 pages, which is a pretty good size for a movie script. So you have to translate those points, those pages, into like percentage points if you want to try to put it on your own story. I would have to do that when I was trying to work with the Save the Cat. I have to divide the points, divide the pages by the total of the pages in order to get the percentage. And then I could like see where it is based on the total page count of my current work. So that's how I was able to try to translate these points on this line onto my own work. So if you have to do that, that is very understandable. Also, the terminology is based on action films. So you have things such as B-side, which is kind of, or B-story, which is based on flipping the cassette over to get on the under layer. So that's a little bit of a old school mid-century term. But they're talking about the internal side, the side where the character is interacting with the side characters and trying to dig down into their internal conflict. And usually in films, that results in dialogue and trying to deal with all the stuff that goes on. You're also having terminologies such as storming the castle, gather the team, etc. So Oh, and also opening and final image. So those are the terminologies that you will see in film. You probably won't see it in any other part of the story structures that usually deals with novels or novelizations. Um, so those are the negatives. You have to translate this work into the novel side, and it can be frustrating. Um, the also frustrating thing is that, and the positive thing about it is that it's very detailed. Of all the story structures, it had a lot of points on the line. This is the most in-depth, detailed story structure other than the Dramatica. And the only positive thing about this is the book. The book is willing to go into details and why they suggest this in this certain moment in the story. And they describe about the mindset behind it, the process, what the characters are going through, what's expected in the plot, why do we have this turnaround, etc. So there's more descriptions and more hand holding, I should say, in describing these parts. So the negative side is that there's a lot of points you have to keep track on this line. So, which is positive for plotters, positive for outliners, people who really need that help in editing. But those who are pantsers that are generally good with their story theory craft in their editing may not need this in-depth detail. I took a peek in and tried to work with the workshop cheat sheet that they had on my own to see like how different it is or how difficult. And since I already wrote the story out, it wasn't that bad. I have a really good sense on where my story is and what the points are. And it also helped me open my eyes up to a couple of things that I was able to fix. But that's about it. If you are a pantser like me and you like making your story out of the blue on the blank page without any sort of pre-planning, if you're going back in editing and it is stressful, this is a good editing tool. The positive notes is that because it tells you what the plot points are and they describe what they are, you're able to identify where you place that on your story. For instance, you have this thing called the catalyst, which is where the hero loses their sense of security or starting to doubt themselves in being such a state of normalcy. And the Captain America Winter Soldier, this is when Nick Fury showcases the those planes of mass destruction that could pinpoint a target and then nip it in the bud before they do anything bad. That really disturbed Captain America because he always believed that you're innocent unless you're proven guilty. So that catalytic moment is where he starts questioning his own values and his place in the world. His sense of security working with Nick Fury just really was unraveled at that point. So you could take that nugget, this whole catalyst nugget, and say, okay, where did I put that in my first act? If you realize you never had that in your first act, then you have a choice whether you want to put that in or not. It's recommended based on the story structure. If you don't have it, you don't need to. Maybe that catalyst is at the very beginning. So you take that pinpoint that they talk about and you can see where on that story mark you had talked about that or you mentioned that. And another positive thing is that you can move that scene, that segment, anywhere in your story and put it in the place that they recommend. And it kind of helps moving scenes around. It kind of helps with expanding and decontracting sections because you know what needs to go where in that section. For instance, in the after the midpoint, you have the section called Bad Guys Closes In and All is Lost. So in those sections, you have about 50% to 68.2%. Right up to that 68.2% is the All is Lost, which is a very small sliver before you go into the last quarter of the book. So it's that very, very narrow area. And you can take that section of the Bad Guys Closes In based on what has happened in the midpoint, the middle of your story, and how that leads up to that all hope is lost moment. And they talk about, what happens when the bad guys closes in. Either if you had a false victory where all, they finally triumphant over something, you then start making it where you make things more desperate and things start getting bad, things are getting worse. You start creating this downhill of despair. If you are wanting your hero to descend to be a really, really bad guy, in the midpoint, they suggest that it is a false defeat because they're not learning, they're not transforming. Usually you do this for your villain because the villain is the opposite and same reaction of the protagonist. So the false defeat is actually the villain. And thus they begin to start doing things where they're a little bit more proactive and they're starting to have things go their way. They have the moments of hope, in a sense, for them. So you get to see what they're wanting you to do, just this small section alone. And if you need to expand upon it, now you know what to do to expand upon it. You could raise the stakes, so to speak. You know that you're leading from that midpoint where you have this victory or defeat, and then you progress into this whole all hope is lost moment, where the hero loses what they want, which is the external conflict. They fell out of that external conflict and went internal for a second. So this is one of the good things about Save the Cat, is that they are able to flesh out what they're talking about when they have these little tiny markers on this line. And they're able to showcase it, I'll bet, through pages on a script where they expect those points to fall, and they're able to back it up by the movie audience viewership of what their expectations are and what they were hoping to see. This is why some of the audience members do not care for the second latest of the Star Wars trilogy. The one in between, no one really cared for that, apparently. So I think the reason why is because it went very far away with the audience expectations of story structure. It didn't quite set their expectations, even though there are some really good parts of it, etc. So another thing about the Save the Cat is the concern about the characters' conflict within themselves. And this is where it ties into theme, where the character begins to have issues based on what's happening from these external forces. And they're not able to break through these external forces until they deal with the obstacles inside of themselves. So they're able to place that character's journey, that internal journey, semi-impose on the plot journey. And they're able to intertwine it and showcase how that whole interaction occurs. It looks like a bunch of zigzags on this graph that they had showcased, but they are trying to explain how these internal conflicts react and then led the character to act on the external conflicts. This transformation, good or bad, is what leads to theme. It's another thing that's great about the story structure is that it talks about theme. Now, theme is simply about the message that the character has to learn, the great solution of all his problems. That is the theme that the character has to deal with in order to expand and grow, even though it could be a negative growth like Breaking Bad or in The Great Gatsby, or it could be a positive growth, no different than all of our superhero movies. And they showcase it on the log line, where this is kind of hard to explain it, but it says on the verge of this stasis or this catalyst, the hero searches for a want. But when a midpoint reveal occurs, they must learn the theme before all is lost. So that is kind of the log line. Again, it's a very movie-esque kind of viewpoint. But you get a sense of how the external conflict led the character to dig deep down inside themselves, try to learn what it is they need to be in order to succeed before all is lost. That is Save the Cat. It is very film orientated, it is action orientated, but if you're willing to take the time to translate the terminologies and what they're proposing in the descriptions, it can be pretty insightful. It can help you understand where your plot points are and your story points are, and how your character is supposed to engage and interact in the plot that you had constructed. It also helps remind you of the theme of your story, so that way the actions of what is occurring in the events and the character's actions correlate with the theme of the story. So that way it's all congealed and together. I think the only story structure that does a really good job is the Michael Hughes 6-act or 5-act story structure. He's able to have something similar where he has the external and the internal journeys and was able to plot that out. Another one that deals with theme is the Dramatica structure, which has a periodic table of all the themes, and they break it down to the subcategories. And you can mix and match depending where you are in this whole scheme, the structure that you constructed. And just like all story structures, it's a guideline. You don't have to follow this. You don't have to have all the points. You don't have to have all the things that they listed. You don't have to have a team gathered together if there was never a team in the first place, etc. So, but you can take this as a means to identify what they're talking about, at least a close enough point on your story, and you can move it where they would suggest it. And if you want to go against the grain, at least you know what the grain is, so you could go against it. And you can see how the audience reacts to it. It does talk about audience reaction in their book. They talk about what the character or the audience is wanting to see. No different than the Dramatica story structure. So do take this, as a grain of salt. I would not use this for plotting. This is a really great editing tool, though. It helps identify what things are. It talks about what the expectations of the audiences are in this story segment. So that way, if you ever feel lost or if you ever feel like, oh, am I doing this right? You can always take a look at this and then a look at your story and you can compare a contrast. And if something's missing in your story, at least you know what it is. And that way you could take your own spin on it. How they would describe breaking into the second act, I have my own personal spin on it. It's not as strong. There's no change in environment, so to speak. It's more situational. And you could do that too in your novel. So, that is Save the Cat. This is the last of the narrative story structure videos. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want more in depth about the Save the Cat, just buy the book. Go to the website. There are other YouTubers that will talk more about it, more in depth as a teaching educational tool. These are just my 7 takes from the whole thing. Next time will be Friday before Halloween. So I'm thinking of going live and create a Halloween story with all of you. So if you want to join me this coming October 30th, which is a Friday, I will be live on YouTube, hopefully, to create a Halloween story that we all could enjoy. I'm thinking about probably noon on. And that way people could hop in whenever they want to, and we could just go from there. I may do this also on my Twitch channel because I need something on the side. I've been talking about doing games and video stuff for a while, and I found the means to do it through Twitch. So if you search for Arduous Spark 912, which is all in lowercase, all smashed together, you should be able to see a little sparkler. That is my channel picture. And I did a lot of gaming stuff, dealing with Five Nights at Freddy's and all that fun stuff. I'm thinking of doing the story structure or story building on that channel too, just for Halloween, and do some sort of spooky Halloween thing. So if you miss out on YouTube, you can go to that Twitch and we could have some fun there. So I hope you stay healthy, stay safe, keep on writing, keep telling stories, and I'll see you before Halloween. Bye!